Don't touch the wire, little buggers. Don't touch the wire. Oh, yeah. Don't touch the wire. Whoa, 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 whoa. Get back. Get back, little buggers. Don't touch the wire. Don't touch the wire. Come on. Come on. Come on. Up, up. Come on. Well, you got to take care of your farm chores. But this morning, I had a wonderful interview with Chief Warrant Officer, 2nd Class, retired U.S. Army, Joseph McMoneagle. You don't know who he is? He was remote viewer #1 for the U.S. Army DOD in the STARGATE program. And let me tell you, a great guy. Great interview, and I think you'll enjoy it today. So enjoy, and we'll talk soon.
Trained journalist, history expert, and combat photographer in Central America.
It was an illegal covert operation. It was one of the darkest moments of my life.
The Vietnamese admitted they had arrested Knight and Graham for violating the territory of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, and they were in prison. But now, the Vietnamese played pirate, demanding a ransom of $10,000 per man.
The British government would not pay a ransom, would they? They don't pay official ransoms. They always make a thing of, we don't pay, otherwise it just happens again.
I was held for 11 months, and 7 of those I was in solitary confinement.
By the 17th of May 1984, Graham was free and returned to America. In the years that followed, Graham's thirst for adventure remained unquenched. He succeeded in working as a photojournalist, and also, ironically, for the CIA during the US war in El Salvador.
Greetings and welcome to Cork's Critical Thinking Corner. Today we have with us Chief Warrant Officer, 2nd Class, retired U.S. Army, Joseph McMoneagle. And Joe has been at this for 44 years, and what this is he's been a remote viewer. And actually, Joe was remote viewer #1 for the Army. Is that correct, Joe?
That's correct.
Correct. Thank you. And he came to the field with a rich background in the research and development of numerous multi-level technical collection systems designed for the United States Army intelligence. His specific area of educational expertise is within the social and psychological sciences. His experiences also includes ADP equipment and technology management, data systems, etc. He is now the owner, but you're also retired, of the Intuitive Intelligence Applications Incorporated. Is that correct, or are you still running that program?
Yeah. Well, I retired the company a year ago.
Was it a year ago? Okay. Okay.
Still active. My wife still does astrology through it. But...
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Now, during your career, Joe, you provided professional intelligence and creative, innovative informational support to the CIA, DIA, NSA, DEA, Secret Service, FBI, U.S. Customs, the NSC, and major commands within DOD, and hundreds of the individual companies and corporations. You still do some work consulting for corporations, is that correct? Or that's retired too? Okay.
Absolutely. And anybody that comes and asks me, I mean, from the DOD and many of those agencies for the last 44 years.
Fantastic. And you're not just a straight leg, as the airborne guys like to say. I mean, you've actually been in Vietnam. And when you're in Vietnam, you were a detachment commander at 2 remote intelligence collection sites overseas, served on an air and sea rescue team in long-range reconnaissance, as a quick reaction strike force team leader and rifleman in war zones. And you earned 28 military decorations and numerous awards to include the Legion of Merit for your RV remote viewing support to nations intelligence community, and you hold the rank of of course you hold the rank of Knight Commander in the Order of the Saint Stanislaus.
That's correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, I definitely want to talk about the books that you've got out. The book that I'm reading your bio from is the Memoirs of a Psychic Spy, which is the one that you're very proud of, and I actually really enjoyed reading. The other ones are Mind Trek, and the one that I also really highly recommend to the listeners. And remember, we're broadcasting on YouTube, X, visually for video, and we're also broadcasting audibly on Spotify and Apple Podcast and Podbean. And the book that I highly recommend if you really want to get into this and get an idea of how to run with this is Remote Viewing Secrets, a Handbook, that was also written by Joe. But we'll be talking about a place that I will highly recommend that you go to, because you're teaching over there at the Monroe Institute
Absolutely.
still? Okay.
Yeah, I've been teaching there for, golly, going on 40 years now.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Were you called, is it Robert Monroe? Is he the founder?
Yeah, Bob Monroe, he was also my father-in-law. I married his stepdaughter.
Oh, wow. This is your
There you
present wife or
Present wife,
oh,
yeah. In
fantastic.
fact, our 40th anniversary is coming up.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. So let's start. We talked about this, and I'm going to bring up my own personal experiences. We're going to I'll take you and I'll take our listeners and viewers back to 1986. And we all have this ability, which is ESP, extrasensory ability, whether it comes in an audio form, comes in a visual. People have visions, people have gut instincts, feelings. The experience that I'm going to flash into right now, and we'll see how I can do this because I've never used the documents. Here we go. I'm going to bring this in, which is in the docs. Bring in let's see how that's coming up. Nope, that's not bringing it up. Oh, here it is, the whiteboard. Okay, so existing whiteboard. We'll bring this one up. We'll open up the board. There we go. Are you able to see this, Joe?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so taking everybody back, this is 1986. I was on an operation working with the Salvadoran Navy SEALs. I actually have the designation as one of two non-Salvadorans who have completed the Salvadoran Navy SEAL course. So I actually can wear their patch, which was kind of fun for me back at the time, but I have the injuries to prove it. And this was the Operación de Golfo número 3, which was the third Gulf War operation, which was a joint venture between the Salvadoran Marine Corps and Navy SEALs. And we were actually supposed to come in as reconnaissance, and it ended up, because of storms, we were unable to come in first, and so we were all working together at the same time. So there we go. Now I can flip through. So this is me in that time, and I'm going to be talking about how I have my pack on, I have my smoke grenade, and I also have my M16. So that M16, what had happened was, it was on a Wednesday. We're coming into an operation. I mean, into a town called Las Arañas, the spiders in Spanish, on the Lempa River, which is a main river. It's almost like the Mississippi of El Salvador. It comes right through the country. And it was a heavily contested area. It was basically owned by the FMLN, and the part of the FMLN, because it was all broken into different groups, was the ERP, which is actually one of the a group of people I did not like, because they love to use car bombs in town. But anyway, we were hunting them and we were after them, and we came into the Las Arañas, and I laid I laid down against a tree, laid my M16 across my lap, and I looked over at the sniper. And the sniper was doing push-ups out in front of me in the grass along the trail. And I heard this voice, and this voice said, "He's going to get it." And it was in English. It wasn't in Spanish. It was kind of weird, because, first of all, it was weird because, to me, it sounded like it was another person talking to me and not a voice in my head. But looking around, there was nobody around, so it was a voice in my head. But it felt like it was someone talking to me from the outside. So that was on a Wednesday of this week. And then the next day, we go further into we come to this village again. And I feel compelled to Rubio, the sniper, here he is with his M14 and an art scope on top. And I say, stand here and read this sign. And the sign says in Spanish, soldados, the top it says soldados in the shadow, soldados, las minas son para los oficiales, deserta, and it's signed by Bras. That was one of the under units of the FMLN, and then FMLN. Basically, it says in English, in Spanish, it says, soldiers, the mines are for the officers, desert, sign, the Bras, and the FMLN. So that was on Thursday. And I don't think more of this other than I just took the picture. So then I flip in, we go in, we've passed, we go on an operation. We actually had contact. I forgot about that. We had contact right after we walked through this village with the FMLN and called in air support. A chopper came in and chased him towards the river. And then we moved on, and then we come back. And as we come back into this town, 12 guys walked down this trail, which was kind of stupid. We were walking down the trail, but I wasn't in charge. So we're walking down the trail. 12 guys walked on the same trail. He's number 13, and he's the one that steps on the landmine, blows off his foot, fractures his tibia. And here we are, we're working on him. And from there, we go over to still providing care after we're bandaging him up. And then we get him in the medevac, and you can see the rotor wash from the choppers moving the grass. It's kind of wild. It's kind of like this was all grass, what grows up in the area. But I look at this as a pass where it's not remote viewing, and that's the reason I'm bringing this up, is to show people this is not remote viewing. This is ESP that everybody has, and I'll be working on a book in the next year that goes into this and how I went. And Joe, we had talked about that previously, where I went as part of my healing for PTS after my 5 years in Central America, where I went on what we call the Red Road, because I had an affinity for the Native American road, which is what we call the Red Road, which is the spiritual road. And this is not thought of as weird. In the native primitive communities, it's thought of, why do you think it's weird? I mean, this is natural. This is what happens and everything. Mm-hmm. But I'd like you to talk about the differences between and the separation of between. It's not a separation. It's the shift of what's ESP and what's remote viewing, and how to work with both of them, and how your specialty in working with remote viewing.
Yeah, the difference, the basic difference is everybody has the sort of psychic input. That's a spontaneous thing that occurs. And there are things that kick it off. For instance, if you're moving through the jungle and suddenly you have this sense that something is telling you to freeze or stop, anything could have given you that message. For instance, you could be moving towards an opening in the jungle, and you'll just want to stop for some reason. What you may have seen something that you, in your mind, said stop because it's unnatural. You didn't notice it enough that it became consciously aware in your mind, but it's something that you keyed off something in your mind that said, that's a danger. So you stop, and you're trying to figure out what it was that made you stop. Eventually, you see perhaps a puff of smoke in the corner of the clearing where somebody might have lit a cigarette. Now you're consciously aware, so you back away.
Okay.
These are things that you're just not cognitive of because it's so quick. Your eye caught it, or you might have heard something, or you might have seen the reflection off of something. These are warnings. These are things that are visual, or that you hear or you smell. Smell's a big one, because when you're in a jungle, especially in a triple canopy jungle, when you're down under that third canopy, there's air that has not moved in many, many months. And the fact that you're stepping into that air, somebody might have belched in there or farted even, and you're going to catch that taint, that slight smell that tells you there's somebody present in that area that you don't expect. And those are small warnings, but you pick up on them without being consciously aware. I mean, totally awake and aware. So it gives you a warning. We have these in everyday life where we pick up on things out of the corner of our eye or something, and so we just know, and so we use those things as a warning or a protection. Especially true in areas where we deal with danger all the time. In remote viewing, what we do is we open to the possibility that we have access to information when we're completely and totally blind to any possible access. It usually is someone who is already very sensitive to just the kinds of things I was just talking about. So what happens is when you have somebody who's totally open to the possibility of that psychic function, and you put them in a situation where they're completely blind, well, they start looking for information that may be coming into their mind, and they get things pop into their head. They put them down, and it turns out that they actually do get information that's pertinent to the situation. And it's actually based or framed by everyone's intention or expectation that they will get it. We found that if you take someone who's highly sensitive to begin with, and then you put them with another person who we call the monitor who's the left brain person, and the sensitive person is a right brain person, what happens is that intention drives them almost in an automatic way to producing information that can be productive. So bits and pieces of information will be produced that can provide the answer to situations that you only need small bits of information to answer. What's interesting is over time, when people start doing this, it's almost like seeing a minor miracle. When people learn that, and it occurs over time, they grow in that. When they have those minor miracles in their life, they start depending on them, and they
Is that a
grow.
good thing or a bad thing?
That's a good thing,
Okay.
because philosophically and emotionally and spiritually, in all ways, they start seeing that these things are real and that they can happen, and they become somewhat dependent on them. And these can save lives, or they can provide information of extreme value. And so they become dependent on them to the point that they can actually produce that information on a regular basis. And they get better and better at it. But if you cheat a little bit, if you give someone a little bit of a hint or something, they don't grow. They become static in that belief. They start thinking, well, the reason I got that answer is because somebody gave me a hint, or they gave me this, or I got it from over here. So it really wasn't that miracle that occurred. And so they don't grow. They don't become better at it. They become static. They start looking for a hint, or they look for that help. And they're not in their head depending on the gift, so to speak.
So you can't cheat. You have to It's like working out. If you don't work out, your muscles are not going to improve. In the same way that if you don't work out with
Yeah,
this,
it's right. It's a you become it changes you. It teaches you that you're more than just your physical presence. It teaches you that yes, we are spiritual beings, that we have the capacity to do magical things, and that we aren't just simply physical animals like all the other animals on this planet. No, we are gifted to a certain extent, and we can use those gifts to keep other humans alive, that we can do magical things, spiritual things that are actual miracles. It's kind of like the laying on of hands to cure people, uh, the protecting of other human beings, just using this.
and that brings up a question, and that's why we were talked about. I wanted to comment about a book called Phenomena that was written by Annie Jacobsen, where if someone had read that book, it would go into the critical. I mean, this show is called Cork's Critical Thinking Corner, but it's based on the idea that I'm trying to get people to clearly look at topics in a clear thinking manner, but you have to have all the information in order to make a decision
Right.
critically. And if you
Yeah.
have something if you have a document that was created in order to sensationalize with the hope that, oh, hopefully it'll turn into another Men Who Stare at Goats type of movie because
Yeah.
they're seeing the dollar signs in a book sale, instead of focusing on the idea that in itself it's actually incredibly powerful, is the idea that people can do amazing things, as you've shown yourself to be able to do. Let's go back to a test case that was back. Was it the submarine? You were on that project?
Yeah. In fact, there were a couple of us. There was a man named Hartley Trent. He's dead now. Uh, he died while he was working in the project. In fact, um, he was as good a remote viewer as I was, and the both of us produced considerable information on the fact that a target that the National Security Council was interested in was they were building a very large submarine, an unusual submarine in this building. It was a huge building, and it was located unconnected to water. It was adjacent to, but a considerable distance from a harbor. It's a northern harbor. It was above I believe it was uh, above the, well, it was a frozen harbor. I'll put it that way, above the, what they call it, yeah, northern. It was in the northern areas of Russia.
Was that like Archangel-esque in that area, or?
Yeah, it was very very far up in the north. It was above a harbor.
Mhm.
It was in a peninsula area. It was a heavily guarded building. It was huge. You could have put the Mall of America inside that building,
Oh, wow.
probably.
Okay. Mhm.
And it wasn't connected to the harbor in any way. And they had railroad lines going into it, and they were taking in material from quite a long period of time. But they had no idea what was going on inside the building. They couldn't buy a picture of the inside of the building, and they had just no idea what was going on. There was a lot of guessing about what was happening inside the building. They just knew it was some new thing they were building there, and there was a lot of guessing though. But it became a National Security Council target, a prime target, and the Soviet section of Langley was very interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought it to us as a target, and it turned out that Hartley Trent and I worked it. And what we came up with was the idea that was a huge submarine was being constructed there. And the submarine was two halves of a submarine being put together this way, which was unheard of at the
Oh,
time.
wow. Okay.
Because, any submarine that's constructed this way would be crushed if it went to any depth.
Because it's
But
not a
the
perfect
idea
circle,
was-
right? Is that the reason?
Right. It wasn't a perfect circle. It was more like a
Oval,
two
yeah.
halves, and so the welding was completely different. It was a special kind of welding. They were using different welding methodologies. The steel walls of the sub were much thicker. And it had slanted launch tubes. The tubes were mounted in front of the tower.
Oh,
The
wow.
tower was much shorter.
Huh.
It was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, the submarine was. I think at one point, Hartley and I came to the conclusion that it was something like 30 feet shy of the length of a Soviet aircraft carrier. I mean, it was just a monster. It was somewhere between 60 and 80 feet wide.
Jeez.
It had all kinds of changes to it with twin reactors.
Mm.
The thing was just a monster. And of course, everybody laughed at us because
No, it was CIA. Was it CIA the one that was giving you the biggest
yeah,
gut?
the senior analyst at the time was Robert Gates, and
Oh.
he when we sent it
Yeah.
to the NSC, our report,
Uh,
he sent it back. So it was total fantasy. There was an Admiral Jake Stewart had taken it to the NSC,
mhm.
and he brought it back, and he showed me the report saying it was total fantasy. He asked me what I should do with it, and I said, take it back. I can't change the report. And so I told him, I said, you need to take it back because that's the best we can do. And I guess he went by the reconnaissance office or something and ordered up some overhead because I told him I got upset. And what I said was it's going to be launched in 112 days.
Oh, you actually gave it.
And
Now, this is interesting because you're now not only visually looking at something in the present, you're actually making a prognosis in the future.
right.
So this
And
is, we're
I've
delving
done
into
that
something. Yeah.
before.
Hmm.
I predicted Skylab was falling out of orbit at one time,
Hmm.
and I
I remember
predicted
that. Yeah.
where it was going to hit in the deserts of Australia
Yeah.
a year ahead of time, and I
Wow.
missed it by 4 days and about 60 kilometers. And I
And
did.
I hate to cut in here right here, but this is a good segue into remote viewing is not just a place, it's place and time.
Oh yeah, time and time and space is immaterial to remote viewing.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Although there's some things about time that I'd like to talk about in a minute. But in any event, I said 112 days it would be launched,
Hmm.
and I guess he arranged for overhead or something. Somebody did, and 114 days later, they produced some overhead, and
You're talking satellite images.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, some imagery,
Yep.
and they caught pictures of the TK-089, which was a prototype submarine. They now refer to as a Typhoon class submarine that the
Okay.
Soviets launched, and was sitting in the harbor tied up to a Soviet aircraft carrier.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was wrong. It wasn't 30 feet shy of the length of a Soviet aircraft carrier. It was 33 feet shy of the length of a Soviet
Wow.
aircraft carrier.
Wow.
It was a monster. And in actuality, they actually launched 8 more of them, and no one ever knew of the following 8.
And what was it the location in terms of the distance between where they were building it to the water line? Was also confusing people?
Uh, it essentially they tore the side out of the building, or they ripped the butt end of the building out or something and cut a channel to the sea,
Okay.
launched it into the harbor,
Huh.
and that's how they got it into the harbor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it wasn't visible for very long, just a few days, and
Okay.
so we captured quite a bit of intelligence on that one submarine.
That's
Uh,
interesting because when you brought up Gates, so actually that was the first interaction with Gates, and then in your book, you talk about you saw him at the was that at Langley, or was that where was that you saw him in the cafeteria and you just wanted to say hi?
Yep. I actually ran into him at the It was I think it was the congressional cafeteria.
Oh, okay.
Uh, they have a cafeteria that a lot of the congressmen use.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was having lunch with a couple of the congressmen, and he came into the cafeteria. So I stood up and walked over to say hello, and he ran out of the room. I offered my hand. I said hello, and he ran out of the room.
Well, you're such a lovable and likable guy. You know, that's
Walked
why
out
it's
of the
hard
room.
yeah.
He didn't want to shake hands with me, I guess, but
yeah. But it brings up that there was a comment made. You said that you'd was this during the congressional meetings where one congressman said you were the work of the devil, and then another one says, you're an angel or doing the work of God's work.
Yeah, on a number of occasions we were doing some of the. Actually, it was a senator who said that I was doing the work of the devil, and I would burn in the fires of hell. And another senator at a different time said that I was doing God's work.
Yeah.
His actual statement was, "You're doing God's work, son. Keep it up."
Cool.
And both times, I mean, the hair on the back of my neck stands up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. It's a common human function. It's not. All human beings have the capacity. It's just that we don't use it as much as back when we were first human. This is an ancient capability. It's a survival mechanism. It's why we're still here.
Yeah.
And the cave bears are gone. The saber-toothed tigers are gone. You got to remember back in the beginning of human, we didn't even have a language. We couldn't speak. But when the men would be out hunting and the men would scatter out around an animal that was highly dangerous, we knew what each person was doing because we could almost read each other's minds. In combat, the same thing occurs when men scatter in the jungle to defend a position or to respond to an attack. You know what each person's doing because you're that tuned to one another, and you hear things. I mean, you were just talking about actually hearing somebody talking to you. I had the same experience at a place called LZ2 Bits. My job, if we were hit, was to go to the bunker and control the radios. And I was doing that. I was going to the bunker, and I was running. And when I got to the bunker, I was going. I mean, full sprint.
Yeah.
I hit the down stairs to the bunker, and I took the first two steps, and I distinctly heard somebody yell at me, "Freeze!" And I froze. I just stopped, and that whole end of the bunker dissolved before my eyes. Wow. And when I woke up, I was laying in the mud. I got blown backwards by the detonation of whatever blew the bunker up, and couldn't hear. And most of the whatever was going on was over, but it saved my life. I mean, so you don't question that. When you hear things, you just do it. And if you're smart, you pay attention.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're sitting in the base camp or wherever and you're reading a book and you get the feeling like you are exposed, you get up and you read the book in a bunker because you're going to get shelled. I mean, that's what you do.
and it's that listening to it that brings up the question of why a person would not listen to it. And I had asked you off camera, whether you were Catholic, and I was baptized Catholic, but I wasn't raised Catholic. But my mother's from Ecuador, and in South America, anybody with this ability is called a brujo or a bruja, which is a witch.
Right.
And
Right.
I remember when I was going down, because the way I worked on my PTS, from combat, it was I went on the Red Road and going, or what we call the Native American spiritual road of learning all about the skills and everything. And so I was well on it, and I just said, I'm going to talk to my mom about it, because 9 times out of 10, someone who has the ability, someone in their direct line of family, either the mother or the father, has that ability clearly. The other one might, like my dad. I know he had the ability, but here's a Marine Corps, Korean War Marine, engineer, electrical engineer in Vietnam. He was a project manager on the communications towers they were putting up, like on Dragon Mountain, all that kind of stuff outside of Saigon, and very right brain thinker. And then my mom would, no, I mean a left brain thinker, and then my mom would be like the right brain thinker. I'm kind of that's why I'm a writer. That's a creative side. But I remember talking to her, and it's the difference between the two, because the same scenario that I just used, that I told you, and with the photography, because I could show my father and said, Dad, look at this. Here is documentation of what had happened in sequence for me personally. And then he says, so, well, did it save the guy? Did you tell him not to step this or step that way? And I go, no, because I didn't really understand what to do with that information. So that was the point of view that my father was coming from, clinical. And then on my
Yeah.
mother's side, it was the idea, I have those voices too. I have those feelings too, but I don't tell anybody, because
Yeah.
it's witchcraft, and how would you talk about something like that, even though it's an innate skill that, if we were to go back to the tribes, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, what is your thought? What is your feeling? Or what are the spirits talking to you about to tell
Well,
us
there's
what we should do?
the other problem is, I had a really good friend in Vietnam, and he's going to be going on R&R in 4 weeks, and
Mm,
was going to Hawaii. He was meeting his wife and his two daughters
mhm.
in Hawaii, and we had a thing. It was like an in country R&R, where we would do a courier run down to Cameron Bay, which was
Yeah.
an island, and we take a courier run down to Cameron Bay and spend a week on the island. And they had a nice swimming pool down there and a nice club, and it was relatively safe on that island.
Hmm.
And he came to me, and he said he came up with a mission where he had to take a particular piece of equipment into the field, and it was pretty hazardous, this particular piece of equipment. And the first guy in Vietnam, in fact, a guy named Eric Davis, was killed using this piece of equipment.
No, well,
And he said, I don't want to do it. I'm getting ready to go on R&R with my wife and children, and I know something bad's going to happen. I feel it. And I
mhm.
said, okay, well, I'll take your mission. You take the R&R, my R&R, down to Cameron Bay, and when you get back, we'll switch off.
Yeah.
He said, fine. So he took my trip down to Cameron Bay, and I took his piece of gear and went out and used it in the
Mhm.
field. And nothing happened in the field.
Mhm.
He went down to Cameron Bay, and the room they gave him at the barracks took a direct hit from 106. I'm
Big.
sorry, 6-inch rocket.
Yeah. Hmm.
It went right through the damn window of the barracks he was sleeping in, killed him instantly. Had no idea
Mm.
it was going to happen. So, where do you go with that? It just did. And
So that brings a question of, when somebody's numbers up as compared to where it's going to
right,
happen. It's going
it's
to
kind
happen.
of like the way we always talked about it was, it's this little golden BB is flying around out there at high speed, and it's got your name and social security number on it. And
Yeah.
it hits you between the eyes. It hits you between the eyes. You
Yeah.
got no say in it. So no, you just do your job, and more people do their job, the more people survive. That's how I always figured it. And so you just do the best job you can, and more people go home. That's kind of the way we looked at it and paid attention.
And then and then so it comes back to the, so do you use the idea in terms of like looking into the future, the skill, or do you use it in terms of going back to space and place? For instance, you as a consultant, you know, when you're called in for lost children, missing kids, or bodies, etc., you're looking at you're looking in time and place, or how are you're doing the remote viewing?
Well, missing children, it's great when you can find a missing child. When you find a missing child, it's a high you can walk around on for a month. I mean, it's great. And usually that's a very spontaneous thing. Because it's really not remote viewing, because somebody will come up and say, we're missing a 5-year-old. And the first thing I always say is, do you have a last seen position? If they say last seen, then I can say, go there and do this. And you can lead them almost right to the kid. The problem is with missing children is once in a while you get an obstinate jerk who's a sheriff or a police officer who doesn't care, doesn't want to talk to a psychic or a remote viewer. Doesn't matter what your reputation is, they just don't want to talk to you. And when they drag their feet and when they fight you, it takes maybe 4 hours instead of 20 minutes to go and do what you want them to do. And there's been a couple of cases where because of that lack of speed, you get there an hour late and the kid's dead. They fall in a creek, they die of hypothermia, and you're an hour late, or you're 40 minutes late or something. And that's hard to live with when you're dealing with some obstinate ass because they don't like dealing with a psychic. You know, if you got the capacity to just look, you know, what's wrong with that? I don't understand that. I've even had times when they wanted to arrest me because I knew where their sneakers were.
Oh, wow.
When they took their sneakers off. Oh, come on, you know, that's ridiculous. And, or, you know, find the kid first, then arrest me, for Christ's sake, you know, I mean, come on. But I've had all those experiences and it's ridiculous. And you know, and the thing about time isn't real. Now science has just recently addressed that and has come back in agreement that it's not. Time is something we invented just to make sense of our errands and things, I think. Time, there's a problem with time when it comes to remote viewing, though. If you have a target in time and you're going into the past, it's a much easier job than going into the future, because going into the past, it's easier to explain things because the information that deals with going into the past deals with concepts that we have a thorough knowledge of. For instance, if it deals with something like a process that exists in the past, we know conceptually, we know everything about that process because it's already been designed and conceived, and everybody knows what makes whatever that process happens. So all the information is pretty solid. So people understand the information as you present it. But if you're doing a target that's in the future, you don't have to go too far into the future, and you may not understand the information itself. And the example I would use would be if you're describing, let's say, a room in Sylvania Corporation in 1975, where they're burning a hole through 4 inches of steel using a laser. So you're burning a hole through steel with a light beam.
Yeah.
First time ever. If a remote viewer described that to you in detail in 1975, you'd say, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's a little crazy. How is that happening? Well, the remote viewer can't tell you how that's happening. They can just describe it in detail. It's like when I'm describing something happening on Mars in the past, I don't even know I'm on Mars because I'm targeting GPS locations. Maybe I'm targeting GPS locations sealed in an envelope, so I'm completely blind.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about something that's 30 million years old. Who the hell knows? But I'm giving as clear a description as I possibly can. Maybe that's in the past, or maybe that's in the future. I don't know. I'm just giving the best description I can. And that's happened. And in that description, I'm saying things like, gosh, the sun looks kind of weird. And my monitor is saying, I don't care about the sun. I care about where you're standing.
No, well, okay. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, totally understand that.
So, and it turns out it was very functional. What I was saying was totally functional. So, and there's been other cases where I'm describing something in detail, and it's 35 years later that what I was describing, which happened to be torsion fields of liquid metal rotating at 80,000 RPM, creating electromagnetic force fields, turns out to be accurate. But 35 years ago, nobody could even envision them. And it was giving me a headache just trying to describe them. Never mind drawing.
Because it not have been experienced publicly to the world yet.
Right. And I had a target once where I tried over and over and over to describe it. And when I got to the point that I had like this long twisted thing with an eyeball on the end, and I finally said, oh, to hell with this. It's an accelerator.
Yeah.
And they said, well, why couldn't you draw it? I said, have you ever been standing inside an accelerator?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you couldn't draw it if you were looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, So there are some things you just simply can't do.
Yeah.
And yet there are people who say, my detractors say, oh, well, they cherry pick your drawings. No, I would say half my drawings are just one drawing. And I do maybe 3 drawings for remote viewing, and I do them in about 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And they're almost verbatim what I'm looking at. So no, go do your homework, then pick at me,
So it's kind of like comparable to like some tribal people in New Guinea when they first saw the plane and they described it in drawings as a bird because they don't have the concept of a plane, an aircraft being a machine or a tool.
Yeah. But in describing the bird, they draw a bird, but they put wheels on it. And they put a gas fuel hatch on it, and they put people riding behind the eyeball. I mean, come on,
Yeah. I want to jump into a little bit of history. So, did you know or interact that much with Russell Targ and Pat Price and all those folks from?
I never met Pat Price. I wanted to, but I never met him. I came in years after he had passed.
Okay.
Russell Targ, I met Russell Targ and worked with him.
For clarity, what's the difference between? So they are with SRI and you're with DOD, and that's where the separation occurs, or?
Well, they were part of the reason I got selected.
Okay.
When you have to understand when the Army got interested in this, what the Army did is the Army brought some people in to look at psychic functioning, to look at some of the materials on remote viewing, on psychic functioning, on this sort of data.
Yeah.
They piled a whole bunch of stuff up on a table. They brought me in from the headquarters. I was the special advisor to the commanding general of the Intelligence and Security Command for the whole Army.
Yeah.
My office was directly over his. I was in charge of my MOS, my military occupational specialty for the whole world. Okay. Now, I was sent to Fort Meade. I spent an entire day there going over all the stuff piled up on a table. The entire idea was to ask me to review this stuff, and it was like newspaper articles, stuff out of Schlock magazine.
Joe, could you hold for a sec? I got to deal with an issue right here. Just a sec. I'm holding on. Okay, we're back on again. Okay, Joe.
I had to go to Fort Meade and spend the day going over all this stuff on this table. A lot of it was garbage, but a lot of it was stuff we had collected from the Soviet Union and China and places like that. And the whole idea was to see whether or not it was a threat. So I went over, I spent the day reading a lot of the stuff, good and bad. And at the end of the day, they asked me, what did you think about this stuff? And my response was, most of it's crap. However, there are some things here that worry me. If they're real, I think there's a threat and it needs to be investigated.
Okay.
So they thanked me and I went back to my headquarters. So I'm at the headquarters and the general called me in and he said, Joe, there's a problem. There's this new project they're talking about at Fort Meade, and I don't know anything about it, and it worries me. I don't want to get bit in the butt here. So I want you to go out to SRI, Stanford Research Institute International, and find out more about this stuff and come back and brief me. So I went out to SRI.
What year was this?
This was 1978.
Okay.
So I went out to SRI and I met Hal Putoff, Russell Targ.
Okay.
And I started asking a lot of questions about the remote viewing. And they said, rather than ask a lot of questions and get some dry answers, why don't you just do a few and you'll understand more about it? So I did 6 remote viewings in 3 or 4 days. It turns out they had the best 6 remote viewings in history.
Wow.
5 first place matches, which were the best results you can get, and 1 near first place. So by the time I got back to the headquarters, they had already reported it to my general. So the general said, they're talking about starting a program at Fort Meade. And that worries me even more. So I want somebody to go to Fort Meade and kind of watch my back. And I said, oh no. I said, this is a career killer, General. I knew anybody involved in this project was going to become the laughing stock of the US Army.
Yeah.
So I literally got down on one knee in his office and I said, please don't send me to Fort Meade.
Yeah.
And he said, Joe, you got to go to Fort Meade. I want you to go there and watch my back. And I stood up and saluted him smartly and said, yes, sir. And I went to Fort Meade and I got recruited as 001. And I did the best job I could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what a guy does in the Army.
Now, is this where the events compile that created the material for that movie? Was it Men Who Stare at Goats? Is that
No,
where it's
no,
not this? That
no.
was a separate program, or what was that?
That no, that came out of a guy named John Ronson, who that's an invented name. That was a guy out of England
Huh.
who wanted to interview people
Uh-huh.
who were recruited for that program, and nobody would talk to him. Well, I stand corrected. Some people did.
Uh-huh.
He found out who I was, and he asked me to give him an interview, and I refused 6 times.
Uh-huh.
The sixth time, I told him if he came near me again, I was going to punch his lights out. And he left me alone after that. The problem was, since I was in the program, I was also giving talks at the Monroe Institute
Yeah.
on other things. So he came to the Institute and listened to one of my talks and acted as though he had interviewed me, which
Uh-huh.
he had. So what he did is he wrote this screenplay in this book, Men Who Stare at Goats, to get even.
Okay.
It had nothing at all to do with anything other than to get even with this not getting any interviews.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's totally a complete fabrication of fiction. Okay.
What it actually had to do with is the fact that there was one man who successfully escaped from the tiger cages in Laos.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Whoa.
And that man, he weighed 100 and I think 120 pounds when he made that escape.
Uh-huh.
He had been in a tiger cage for almost 2 years.
Jesus. Yeah.
He killed 2 of his captors.
Yeah.
When he made his escape. They were in hot pursuit with dogs and an entire platoon. They were chasing him down a creek bed, and they were closing on him. They were not shooting at him because they knew he was weak and they would eventually run him to ground. When they came around the side of a hill, at the same time, coming around the backside of the hill, was a Huey helicopter.
Oh, wow.
The Huey helicopter, when they spotted the NVA chasing him and him running, they were all dressed in black. So they opened fire. At the last minute, the guy yelled, "Not the guy in front, not the guy in front," because he had a heavy black beard.
Yeah.
And they knew the NVA couldn't grow a heavy black beard.
Yeah.
So they set the helicopter down, gave him heavy suppressive fire, loaded him into the helicopter and flew him out of there.
Okay.
And they put him in charge of the SEER program at Fort Bragg.
That's not Colonel Raw, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, this was, I think he was a sergeant major at the time. I can't remember now. So don't quote me. I can't remember his
Just
rank,
because of SEER school. That's the reason I brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. But our general had heard that he had killed his 2 jailers using his mind.
Oh my God. Wow.
And so he wanted to know if that was fact or not.
Okay.
So we went down to Fort Bragg, and the program that he ran out of the same area where they trained Special Forces medics. The medics, of course, were trained using goats.
Yes.
And so when he was asked, he said, "General, are you asking me if I kill with my mind?" And the general said, "Yes." And he said, "Bring that goat over here." And they brought the goat over. And he said, "General, this is how you kill." And he turned around and he hit this goat with his fist right between the eyes.
Oh.
Dropped him dead right there on the spot.
Yeah.
And he said, "That's how you kill, General."
And
walked away. He obviously was pissed.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't there. That's what was told to me.
Okay.
That's the whole thing right there.
Mhm.
Well, that's what got back to the John Ronson or whatever his name was.
Okay.
So he
That
wrote a
created
whole
this whole.
book and blew it all out of proportion, and that turned into a movie. And I have to say, it's a great comedy.
Yeah.
I like the
It's
movie,
it's funny.
but people are constantly asking me, "Are you the guy that jumped off the roof?
Yeah.
Or are you the guy in the chicken coop?" Or and
But
I
it's
have to
total.
say,
It's not even the
no,
team. It's not has nothing to do with Fort Meade or anything like
has
that.
nothing to do with anything.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Um, so I'm looking at a document dated May 1984, the 9th, and it's you're the one that put this together, and it was actually a brief. It was a security review of Mind Wars, and what I found interesting is the classifications of all these programs. Like under SRI, there was the Project Scan8.
right.
And then there's Gondola Wish, which is your program.
Yes, that was the
Part of
name.
it. Yeah.
That was the name of our program
Yeah.
initially.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to ask you specific because I mean we if we've read about this, we know about Ingo Swann and we know
Right.
about well, G. Gordon Liddy, of course, but Colonel Alexander. Now he's become quite
Yeah.
famous for what was the issue? Because he was coming from a ESP point of view towards this, and that was one of the issues. He didn't want him touching the program, or what was that all about?
Oh, no, no. John Alexander, he's a very good friend of mine. He has
Uh-huh.
been for many years. When we when we met, we weren't friends because
Uh-huh.
uh he was, well, I'm not gonna get into the early part, but uh John he had his own marching orders from the general.
Okay.
He
The
was
same
out,
general. Okay.
yeah, he was out doing his own thing. He was on
Okay.
his own orders from the general. He was an investigator of many things.
Yeah.
And so he was following his own orders, as I was, as other people were. And we just clashed over that. But he John was doing his own job. I mean, where the clash came was we were under orders not to let anyone into our office, not
Oh,
to let
gotcha.
anyone on our project that were not specifically cleared by the general. Well, he had the idea that because he was working directly for the general, that he was cleared for anything the general, knew about.
Gotcha. Okay. Mhm.
And I had to inform him that he wasn't. But later, when we got that all straightened out, John and I got to be very, very good friends. And I honor him for his work and his job.
So he
And
was not in the 902nd, or he was, but he wasn't in your specific
he
project.
was, but not in our specific area,
Gotcha. Okay.
in his own specific area. So, yeah,
Because he's
there's
written a lot. I mean, he's documented a lot, publicly about what he was kind of doing, which I'm not really clear on because it seems like
yeah,
what was the difference between your two lines of detail?
we were specifically the remote viewing,
Okay.
everything to do with the remote viewing. Outside of remote viewing, we weren't interested.
Gotcha. Okay.
He was everything else.
Okay.
So he was looking at the all other means of non-lethal warfare.
Gotcha. Okay.
You
And that's
can
his big thing.
imagine
He's yeah, his big
you
thing is
can
not lethal.
imagine it, he was involved in it.
Yeah.
Okay. And some of it was really interesting.
Mm.
I will tell you that. And he was pursuing all of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Just that he had no idea what we were doing.
And he was
so,
never allowed to because that was not his deal.
right,
Need
right,
to know. It was a total need to know. Okay. Okay.
right.
And so the evolutions of the program, because that's where it gets confusing for people who do track this, is first there's Gondola Wish, and then it was Gondola Wish until Grill Flame, or what happened?
Proclaim, it was Gondola Wish, then it became Grill Flame,
Mm-hmm.
and then we were outed by President Carter.
That's when it flipped.
Accident.
Okay.
And what happened is there was a down Russian bomber, and they were carrying a lot of sophisticated intelligence gear, as well as probably a couple of very powerful nukes.
Yeah.
They went down over Zaire, or I'm sorry, they went down over the Congo somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And many people had, you can imagine with the nukes, many people were looking for that plane.
Yeah.
And nobody could find it. My buddy Hartley Trent kept saying it's parked on a road. It's parked on a road. Well, roads in the Congo are rivers. Yeah, I mean,
trails. Yeah,
any
game trails.
idiot could say it's a river.
Yeah.
and nobody would listen to him.
Hmm.
And in fact, it was a river. They put it on. They put it down in the center of a river where there was white water, so you couldn't see it in the white water. And so what happened is they got three of the best psychics in the group, and they not interrogated, but they put maps in front of all three of them, and they were all three in different places, and all three of their little circles on the maps interlocked.
Uh-huh.
So they inserted a SEAL team, and they had a rope in because it was heavy jungle.
Yeah.
And they weren't on the ground 3 minutes, and they started interacting with some of the local natives
Mm-hmm.
who were carrying parts of the plane back to their huts to patch leaks in the hut roofs, because the plane was right there in the river, and so they recovered everything on the plane.
Huh.
And so President Carter gave a press briefing, and he was holding our folder in his arms. It was a green folder with a red stripe and said Grill Flame on it.
Jeez.
And they asked him, President Carter, how did you find the plane? He said, we recovered the plane and all its contents and turned it all over to the Russians.
Oh.
How did you find it? He said, well, we used our psychics.
Oh, wow.
So, Grill Flame went away and we became Center Lane.
Okay.
And Center Lane later went away and we became Sunstreak.
Wow.
And Sunstreak went away and we became Stargate. I think there was one other name in there somewhere. But
so Stargate was actually the last or toward the end?
Last one, yeah.
Okay.
The last one.
And then what happened? CIA took it over, or what happened?
No, what happened is Congress, there are some people, believe it or not, in Congress who can't keep their mouths shut.
Yeah.
They get briefed, and within 24 hours, it's on the street. So Congress decided that the CIA should take it over and bury it, turn it black, bury it so deep it disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that CIA should take it over, turn it black, and be in charge was repugnant to the CIA, because the CIA had been dragged over the coals for 3 or 4 years over another project. I can't remember the name of it right now, where they had used LSD and whatnot for interrogation purposes.
Oh, like MK Ultra or something like that, or
that's it, MK Ultra.
Mm-hmm.
And so they refused.
Okay.
And they got the proper answer back, which is, we don't work for you, you work for us, and you will take it over. So they said, well, okay, we'll take it over, but we want to review it first to make sure it's okay. And so they reviewed it. They put a guy named Ray Hyman, who was the greatest denier of psychic functioning in the world, as the reviewer.
Okay.
And they got a woman named Utz, Jessica Utz, who is probably one of the top 3 statisticians in the world,
mm-hmm.
to review it. And they both were given 7 or 11 files, and the files were the 7 or 11 worst possible files you could review.
Okay.
Of the project. And they came back, and of course Ray Hyman came back and said, absolutely, there's nothing here worth a damn. And Utz came back and said, in spite of the lack of value in these files, there's enough material here to show that there is an absolute event happening. And so they excised her report from her statements from the report.
Okay.
And then said, based on Hyman's report, that it was of no value. And then they outed it on Ted Koppel's Nightline, and Robert Gates came out and said that it was of no value. It never did anything of value. It produced no information of value. That could, the way he put it was, it never produced any information that could be used. It's kind of lying by omission. The way he said it was, there was no information produced that was standalone information that could be used that was of value. Well, of course not. No standalone information is ever used by anybody in intelligence. It has to be information that's confirmed by at least one other source. Before it's ever used. Okay. So that's lying by omission. The fact is, over 500 times the CIA came back for more information over the course of 23 years. So that's kind of like saying, I'm a food critic. I went to this restaurant when it opened and kept going back every week for 500 weeks, and they serve rotten food. Give me a break.
And it's interesting because if you've ever received an intel brief, a lot of times you're not told where it comes from. All you are given is the information.
Right.
Follow up on that information, and that's it. So who would know where it came from?
And historically, I will tell you, the people at the very bottom loved our information. The people at the very top loved our information. The bureaucrats in the middle hated us. Does that smell or what? And the guys at the bottom, the agents on the street, out in the world at large, loved us like nobody's business. Some of the agents said they were having a consistent 6-martini lunch whenever they came by to see us.
Cool.
Guys at the top, like some of the senators that were so powerful that they could not be hurt standing next to a psychic. Just the most. Senator Cohen, Senator John Glenn, these kinds of people supported us in a huge way. In fact, in when I was working at SRI, we have a letter in a file thanking us for saving $100 billion project. Not saving the project, killing the project, saving $100 billion in budget.
Outstanding.
Senator Cohen. So that was the MX missile project. We proved that it could be undermined by just remote viewing alone.
Okay.
So
now you had an opportunity to meet the Russian, the Soviet counterparts. That experience.
Oh, that was great. I had coffee with Major General Sham, the deputy director of the KGB. He's an interesting guy. He was surprised at the effectiveness of our program. I did an experiment with their top psychic. It turned out to be a complete overlay. We were in 2 deprivation chambers and half a mile apart, quarter mile apart. And we both had digipads in our lap, and the idea was we had to decide who the sender was and who the receiver was psychically. And once we decided that, the sender had to send a message and the receiver had to copy it onto the digipad.
Oh, wow.
And sitting in the deprivation chamber, I was thinking, well, it doesn't matter who the sender is and who the receiver is. Both can happen at the same time simultaneously. So I just put my pen in the middle of the digipad and said, I'll just let it go wherever hers goes.
Yeah.
Because it was a female. She thought the same thing. So for 30 minutes, we just let the pins roam. And when we met in the control room, they showed us the two digipad outputs. There was one of these.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, there were some very tiny differences, but it looked like a butterfly picture.
Interesting.
It was beautiful. And we asked for a copy and they said, "Yet." They wouldn't let us take a copy.
That's wild. You know, a lot of people ask these questions about remote viewing. Is it an out-of-body experience? It's not an out-of-body experience, is it? Because you're still in your body, you're looking remotely. Because I'd read that was it Ingo Swann was talking about that if it was an out-of-body experience, what would happen is if they had a receiver or they had one of their own people over there, they would notice you in the room, and that actually was a tell that you didn't want to have happen. You wanted to really do remote viewing, which means if you're remote, you're not over there, you're over here looking over there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know, I would argue a lot with Ingo about a lot of the stuff he believed. And the reason I would do that is because I think a lot of what he said was wrong.
Okay.
You know, for instance, in his training system, when he trained people, it took too long. He would train people, it would take 18 months minimum, sometimes 2 years.
Jeez.
I can train somebody to do effective remote viewing in about 2 weeks.
Cool.
So the problem with the way he trains is he trains people by looking at the target.
Okay.
He's sitting and looking at the target. The person knows he's looking at the target. It becomes a question of you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer, you're getting colder, you're getting colder. That's an old Wiles game.
Yeah.
So what he's doing is he's teaching people to read him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But the person, as soon as they realize they're reading him, they're not gaining anything. They're stagnant.
Yeah.
They're not learning the magic of it. They're not believing they're better than their physical sense.
Yeah.
They're not growing philosophically or spiritually. So what I do is I start with the way that it's actually used in the field, the monitor, the viewer, the analyst. I show them that unless you produce something that's readable and usable for the analyst, it's of no value to anybody. So you have to produce information that an analyst can use. The monitor has to make sure you do that. So when you're printing and you're sloppy, the monitor has to say, wait a minute, I can't read that. How's the analyst going to read that?
Gotcha.
Reprint it. You understand? That kind of thing. So the monitor is the left brain. The remote viewer is the right brain.
Okay.
The analyst, you're never going to see the analyst. You're never going to talk to the analyst. You have to understand the analyst has a desk full of information, piles of information. What they need is the key that unlocks the answer to that pile.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'll give you an example. If you have 4 possible entries to a building that's holding a hostage, and they're going to kill the hostage if you come in the wrong entry and take 2 seconds too long getting there. You need to know which entry. And Hartley Trent comes in one morning and he says, all I get's the smell of roses. One of the entries has a rose garden some old lady put in front of her apartment.
Mm-hmm.
That's the entry you want to use.
Gotcha.
That's what remote viewing is good for.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about drawing a perfect drawing of the entry. It's about the key that gets you in the right entry. That's what it's for. It's not about all these magnificent drawings and beautiful things. You get to those after 10 years of experience.
Mm.
You may get to those 20 years later.
Mm.
But it's when you've captured the magic, when you've come to understand you can do that sort of thing. But very early on, it's about the magic.
Yeah.
It's about the knowing that human beings are pragmatic, that they function like an animal, and they're spiritual and they're magical beings, and they marry the two up and they do great things like heal the people with the laying on of hands, pray and change things.
The point that you bring up is about the key is phenomenal, because it just hit me as we're talking that, as you recall, I was in prison in Vietnam, and I was held in their re-education camp.
Right.
So when I got back, I was debriefed at DIA, at the JCRC, the Joint Casualty Resolution Center, basically POWMIA division. And they have sat photos laid out for me of the prison that I was held at Kinh Yang in West Vietnam.
Right.
And they brought in an engineer, a captain from Army Corps of Engineers, and his specialty was to, quote, be a key to be able to he was an analyst / interpreter in terms of what we were looking at. So we're looking at the photographs, and they automatically just thought, oh, well, it's storage. Well, I said, yeah, it's storage, but it's not storage of rice, and it's storage of people. It was actually a giant cell.
Yeah.
Center of the prison that we were held at. And they would not see that because they couldn't tell that. All you could tell was the structural aspect of the outside. So this is, here I am with these analysts from DIA, and they're trying to interpret, what is this? And I'm telling them, this is a prison cell. This is a large prison cell that opens up at night and then closes back down, and they lock the doors, and they keep like the trustees and all those people in there, while people like me were held in the one cell, one person type of quad. But in that moment, I was the key for them, in the same way that you're talking about. You're the remote viewer. You're the key for the analysts, right?
It's like with the 14 months of the people being held in Tehran.
Yeah.
Being held in an American embassy. So they were able to bring embassy members in that had just that embassy. So they had worked in different rooms in that embassy. So they had full knowledge of what was in those different rooms.
Yeah.
What could be seen through those different windows, what the colors of the walls were, the rugs, where the furniture was located, all that stuff. So when the remote viewers are talking about the health and welfare of the prisoners, and how they were being held, what they were being fed, all those kinds of things, and what they were possibly seeing through the windows, then the people that had just left the embassy could say, that's about 85% correct for that room. Then if it's 85% correct for that room, it must be 85% correct for what they're stating about the people. And the guards. And what they're seeing through the windows. So Hartley Trent, I'm going to use him again as an example. He was every bit as good as me, or better in many cases. He said one day, I'm seeing trees through this window. It looks like part or the corner of a courtyard. And it was a courtyard in the center of the embassy. And I see nothing but spider webs in the trees. So they had another observation point outside the embassy from a half a mile away, but they had a powerful telescope in the upper floor of a hotel. and they were looking straight into that courtyard. You know what that was?
What was it?
Claymores mounted in the trees.
Oh, wow.
They had gone in with a helicopter into that courtyard and deliberately crashed it into that courtyard. It would have killed everybody on board.
Wow.
It would have been nuts to do that.
Wow.
But that's remote viewing.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
Amazing.
And so, and then we had an addendum we had to put on our reports. And I can't go into that, but our addendum was adding a whole lot of things about the rescue plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, they actually thought we had a source.
Oh, wow.
They didn't know about it.
That's great.
And well, great or not, I have my life threatened.
Oh.
We want your source, or you're not going to survive walking out of this room.
Wow.
Yeah. How do you get out of that bind?
Yeah.
You start telling them what they don't want to hear about themselves. Yeah. Now you just made an enemy.
Yeah.
You will never forgive you for what you know about them.
Yeah.
But they now understand what psychic functioning is all about.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's an ugly position to be in. And you know, it was not a fun thing. The stress is enormous. And one of my best friends in the unit, we had 6 people. We lost the woman immediately. This was a captain, a naval captain. And our boss was the most misogynistic son of a whatever. It was an all volunteer unit. She gave him the finger and walked out the door. She was the one doing the viewing when the helicopter enveloped in a talc cloud, swung the tail beam into the C-130, exploded.
Yeah.
She was actually remote viewing Desert One. In the middle of her viewing, said, "Oh my God, explosion, 12 dead or wounded."
Jeez.
That report got to the Situation Room 3 minutes ahead of Desert One's
Oh
report.
my God. Wow.
Yeah. So afterwards, we're so despondent. We shut down our viewing.
Yeah.
We're all sitting together, 5 men and her. We're all officers. We're all sitting in a room together, drinking. The boss comes, sees her drinking with us, does this, calls her out of the room and says, "That's conduct unbecoming an officer to be drinking with 5 men in one of the hotel bedrooms." You know what she said? "Put it where the sun don't shine."
Yeah.
And we lost one of our best viewers.
Damn.
Okay. We told him, "You do that again, we all walk."
Yeah.
I mean, that's not right.
Yeah.
So the stress, to give you an idea of the stress, my best friend in the unit, I'm not going to tell you his name. He's married 6 months. He's 29 years old. And he's got a kid on the way. And he drops dead from a massive coronary in my office. And I gave him CPR for 45 minutes. The stress was enormous.
Yeah.
I just cannot ever talk about the stress. And that's why when somebody writes about me hating it, makes me so angry.
Yeah. No, like I say, I was like, when I read that book review of what was it, Phenomenon by Annie Jacobsen, and it's like, you know, for those of us who know about like the one she did about the agency and people who work in that field.
I wrote her a letter.
And she didn't. How did she respond?
She didn't. She ignored me.
Totally. Oh wow.
I told her where. I asked her, "How can you make that? How did you get to that conclusion?"
Yeah.
there's no way you could have reached that conclusion from my book if you read it.
Yeah.
No, she went through it, speed read it, maybe every 10 pages just to glom the information she needed to write a sensational thing to make money. That's all she did. That's how she writes her books, to make money, get it out quick, that kind of thing.
Jeez.
And so,
well, I'm just so happy you've been able to do these interviews with people to get the word out, because I think it's faster, and it
yeah,
gives an opportunity to people to listen to you and have you describe what really happens and has happened. And these are tools. I mean, this is the thing that I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed with your background, the things that you've gone through in your life, and honored that you're, talking with me on this show, that we can show people that this is not mumbo jumbo. It's nothing to be afraid of, and actually it's a tool set that if you use it, it can be very beneficial to not only you but your community.
when we met with the Russians, the there's in the second group of people, there's one woman who they shoved her off in a room alone because she didn't do what they were doing. They call her the witch. Okay. And I guess she was doing the bruja stuff or something. But she was the one who found the DEA agent who copped the $2 million or whatever and took off with it. But he was on the FBI's #1 position in the top 10 most wanted. And she found him in the middle of winter in Wyoming, in Lovell, Wyoming. Everybody else was down in the islands looking for him because it was winter. I wonder why they were down there, but she found him in Lovell, Wyoming, and never didn't get credit for it until they did a documentary on it, and then they discovered that she was the one who found him. But it was really kind of interesting. She was also a top analyst in the Pentagon for the Middle East for many, many years. Anyway, her name's Angela Ford. She's just a brilliant young lady, and every bit as good a remote viewer as me. And Angela, she's wonderful. She does automatic writing and a number of other things, but her remote viewing is excellent. And same thing. Push her off to the side, call her a witch. But she doesn't care.
Yeah.
She just does the work. Just does the work.
Yeah. And let's talk about the work in terms of you're still being a consultant for the Monroe. What's the full name? It kind of floored me because when I was reading the FOIA and reading the release documents, and that's when you started working, you were actually personally going to the Monroe Institute. It said MIA, and I said, was this? And it brought that question is, did you actually during, like, let's say the Reagan times, were you ever called upon to do any remote viewing for possible American MIAs back in Indochina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing that really bothered me about the end of the Vietnam War, they did absolutely no negotiating for the release of prisoners in Laos.
Yeah.
The reason why is we were never supposed to be in Laos, so there's no reason to negotiate that.
Yeah.
Although all enlisted prisoners were taken to Laos.
Yeah.
By the NBA. They took our enlisted prisoners to Laos and put them in tiger cages. They didn't go there voluntarily. They were taken there. And we should have negotiated for the release. But the decision was made by President Nixon, and his negotiator was who?
Yeah. Kissinger.
Kissinger. Yeah. And the reason Kissinger didn't negotiate is because he hated talking to those little brown people. He had a huge prejudice against it, and he hated the food. He hated the smell. He hated all about it, and he didn't want to go and negotiate. So since Laos was off limits. Well, we don't have to negotiate. So all the enlisted prisoners are dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if they weren't, they are now.
Yeah.
So that's a grievance I have a tremendous feeling about. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But everybody who has a son who didn't come back because they're missing in action, you can lay that.
A lot of people, don't know that I was actually a Navy midshipman when I went back to Southeast Asia, and that when I was taken prisoner, I was actually a Marine Corps officer candidate on an LOA when I got caught. And the reason, and DIA, when they found that out, they went, "Whoa! Thank God the Vietnamese never found out."
Yeah,
I didn't have my ID cards, etc., on me. But the reason I'd gone was because I knew I felt I knew I could find that story, and that's why I went in. I was looking for MIAs. Everybody talked about the treasure hunting aspect of it. That was the vehicle for me to get there. But the intention was to find out what I could find out about those we'd lost over there. And I'd already been hearing stories about there were still some left up in Laos, maybe a few left over in northern Cambodia. But they were still there. But the thing about it is, if it gets to a point where they can't even negotiate, because if they're caught with them, it makes the country so bad in the eyes of the world, they're just going to kill them. And that's it.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why I was always curious about when I heard about the Stargate program, whether you'd actually been requested, especially during the Reagan, because during the Reagan administration, I felt that there was an upswell to try and resolve this. That there wasn't during the Carter administration, and definitely not during the Ford administration when they were trying to just get the hell away from it. And then, you heard stories about Bill Casey and how Casey wanted to resolve it too. And I was just curious about whether the agency had come to your department or to DIA and said, "Hey, you got anybody going?" Or was it just DOD made a request to say, "Hey, can you guys take a look?"
Nobody ever asked.
Not. Wow.
No.
What a waste.
The only thing I was unfortunately asked about was weapons of destruction,
mass destruction.
Yeah. And I was asked that, I think, probably 6 or 7 times, and 6 or 7 times I said there are none.
Yeah.
And it was like a wink, wink.
Wow.
Are you sure? Wink, wink. I said, no, yeah, I'm pretty sure there are none. Well, gosh darn, I wish you'd look again. Wink.
That's that's when the politics, because somebody's got an agenda to make some money.
Yeah.
So now the Monroe Institute, what are you doing there? How can people, because you offer this now publicly in the public realm, training.
I train remote viewing. We do a remote viewing 1, which is a basic intro, and then we do a remote viewing 2. We do it both in a week-long residential training, and then we also do it online. We started the online course during the COVID problem. It was pretty easy to just transfer it over to a weekend. It's actually 3 days online, and that seems to work pretty well. We've had quite a few people online. The problem with online is getting everybody on the same sheet of music. The time differentials.
Oh, gotcha.
Problem for a lot of
like
people.
Even for us right now in terms of 5 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah, it can be really difficult for people in the Far East versus England, for instance. But we try to accommodate as many people as we can. I'll do almost any time system that accommodates as many people as possible in one area.
And what's the demographics of the type of student that comes to you for this type of instruction?
We have lots of people who get training other places and it doesn't seem to work out for them. So that's fine. Methodology doesn't matter. you know, the way I put it is, if you can stand on your head in a bucket of mud whistling Dixie through a straw in your left nostril and do remote viewing, that's cool.
Yeah.
The only requirement is the protocol.
Okay.
Protocol demands that you're completely blind, and anybody in the room with you or anybody that is teaching it has to also be blind. So I'm blind.
Okay.
My trainers are blind. Everybody's blind. We choose the targets randomly out of a very large target pool.
Okay.
So, you know, we're working with blind everything.
Huh.
The reason why is because when you successfully describe something and you're completely blind and everybody around you is blind, wow, you know, then you know it's something special. It's magic. And that does something to you. That says, wow, there must be something here that works. And it's called intention. Intention to do something. And then you have attention to detail, which makes it happen. There's a special formula for it. We teach that. So you have intention to make it happen, attention to detail, and then there's an expectation for outcome. So there's this kind of loop that comes back to you that makes it happen. And we teach that very formally. And once people get the hang of it, it becomes a regular thing. And once it becomes a regular thing, you improve philosophically. And then through practice, it becomes better and better. And by the time you get, it's like I call it a martial art of the mind. And I've called it that for 38 years now. And so I teach a martial art of the mind.
Cool.
So, and it's, I call it a journey. It's not you learn it and then that's it. No, you learn it and you keep improving it for the rest of your natural life. And it's important. You can use it in day-to-day life. You can use it to be a better person. You can use it to meditate. You can use it to improve your lifestyle. You find that it's applicable in the way you run your business. In fact, I got most of the answers for how it works out of business.
Okay.
If the application, the intention, attention to detail, and expectation for outcome comes right out of any modern business. If it's making women's shoes to manufacturing new refrigerators. If you don't have the
for peace of mind right now, it seems like it would be a great opportunity for people to, because of the stress that's in the world right now, it's a great way.
That's right. That's right. So being a more stoic person in today's world will keep you healthier.
Yeah.
It makes you happier and healthier.
And every time that I've always interacted with you, I always enjoy having conversations with you, Joe. And it's because you practice what you preach. And the life that you've lived has created this aura about you that when people interact with it, it's what's the word?
Well, it's comfortable.
It's comfortable and it's catching. It goes to the other person, and then you have this duality or triality, and it just expands to other people. Where
I try to get everybody in sync.
What's that?
I try to get everybody in sync.
Everybody's in sync. Everybody's in sync.
One of the things I was just going to say, one of the things you got to understand is that the world's a bad place when you don't know what you're doing. It's a good place when everything you do is to better yourself. Because bettering yourself becomes a goal that everybody watching you wants to achieve. So you draw good people to you, not bad people.
Because it's attraction. I mean, that's the thing. It's kind of what you put out in the world is actually what you're going to bring, whether it's good or bad, pain or pleasure or whatever.
That's right.
Well, on that great note, Joe, I wanted to thank you again for being on the show. And I'm going to put a link on YouTube and on X, and I'll also put it on the podcast. You'll be able to see the link to the Monroe Institute. Would that be a good place to send people over there?
That's good. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And again, this has been broadcast on YouTube, X, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Podbean. If you're over on the podcast section, please make a comment. Helps the show. And also on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, and also on X. And again, thank you again, Joe, for coming on, and look forward to talking with you in the future.
You're welcome, Cork. Take it easy, man.
You too.
Any way you can get it.
Yeah.